You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
And I'm Erin's dad.
And I'm Michael.
This is a very unique episode of the Lutheran Ladies Lounge because we let boys in today. But we have a really good reason for doing that because we're celebrating Father's Day today. And we couldn't sit around as four women and talk about Father's Day without actually having some fathers in the Ladies Lounge with us, since that's kind of the whole point, is to, talk to dads. So today is our special Father's Day episode. We are celebrating all things fatherhood, which is why Erin's dad is joining us, and which is why we have a super fan of the Lutheran Ladies Lounge joining us. So Erin, take it away, introduce our guests, and what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, after doing our Mother's Day episode, we thought it's coming up on Father's Day, and we thought, well, maybe we should actually have some men in. And we're like, well, what men would we want? And I'm like, well, my dad loves the Lutheran Ladies Lounge. We all know it. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, well, who else loves the Lutheran Ladies Lounge but my friend Michael Grannis? So I'll start with my dad.
It's true.
He's related to me. So my dad is Tony Alter. He is a retired pastor, and he is a classic dad jokester in that, let's be honest, no one laughs harder at his jokes than he does.
Well, maybe if we have guests over, sometimes they do.
That's true. Guests. He revels in having guests, so he has fresh. He can bust out all of his best jokes again.
Both of them.
Yeah. So early on, when we set up the Facebook group, I ended up having to decline request for membership from both my dad and Michael more than once.
I was starting an online protest.
Michael and I go way back. He and I were missionaries together in Japan, and we've been friends since then. So Michael's also a pastor. He is a pastor in Michigan.
Yeah.
And I thought of him also for this episode because I really remember when Michael when he and his wife Christy were first expecting their first baby, he was super nervous. He did not want it to be a girl.
It's true.
Michael, tell us more. I know you didn't end up having a daughter for your first child, but tell us more about that. What was your rationale? And then what was it like for you once you did finally become the father of a daughter?
Yes. Well, the simplest way of saying it is I was terrified not so much of having a daughter, but of having a world full of teenage boys to have to worry about one day.
That is a fair worry.
Yes. And so I wanted at least one boy first to help me so that, God forbid, I would have to end up in jail for hurting some boy down the road. Simply put. So our first child, we did not find out if we were having a boy or a girl. So I was surprised in the delivery room with the birth of our son, Micaiah, who is now 13 years old. And while we were expecting our second, I had much the same feeling. I said, I don't think I'm ready for a girl yet. I'm afraid that we're going to have a girl and I won't be ready for all that entails down the road. And I was convinced that we were having a daughter and had gotten myself ready for that. And we also did not find out with our second if we were having a boy or a girl. And so there in the delivery room, our second child was born, another son, Tovin. And literally the first thought out of my mind when I saw that he was indeed a boy was, I'm ready for a daughter. And the next three children that we had were daughters. The next three children we had are daughters. So Kina, Eliana, and Delora are my beautiful, wonderful daughters. And well, Kina is the eldest of the three. She's 9, so I haven't quite had to deal with those teenage boys yet. But I have 2 older brothers for her to help me along with that.
Nice.
Well, older brothers are great, by the way. Speaking from experience, I have 2 older brothers, and they definitely were very protective of me when I was entering my teenage years. I have some stories about that I won't share.
So let me get this straight. What you're saying is you were so terrified of having to deal with teenage boys for your daughters that you have now unleashed a teenage boy upon the world? As the mother of teenage daughters, I'm concerned here.
Well, see, as the father of these teenage and soon-to-be teenage boys, I can control just a few, but having a whole world full of teenage boys to deal with is another story.
Fair enough.
Okay, so Erin's dad. What about you? I want to know your story about Erin.
Oh, Erin. Our story on the air, we didn't know if we were going to have a boy or a girl. It was before that technology was readily available. So we were prepared either way, but we had the same name picked out either way. She was going to be Erin no matter what. We were going to make it Erin or Erin. And so that's why she's she. And it worked out really well. Then we decided to try it again. And so we had another girl, and we decided to try it again. And I told everybody, we decided to try it one last time, and we had a boy. And they've been great. I can't really say that I'm more anxious about girls or boys, although I suppose at the start, like Michael, I probably was more anxious about the idea of girls. But hey, they're tough. I'm not too worried.
Yes, tough is a good word. Good job, Dad.
It is pretty tough.
She's one of our resident oldest children, too, which works out quite well when there's a nice mix of us in the lounge.
That's right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I'm the youngest child, but I am the firstborn male, so it kind of counts both ways. I can either be the baby of the family or the firstborn male. So
Okay. Dad, I'm curious for you. Your parents divorced when you were a kid, and your mom was your primary parent who raised you, your mom and your grandmother. So what stands out for you growing up in that context?
it was really difficult in a lot of ways. Now I know that actually you never knew my father or have much background, so you probably don't even have all the facts straight in your head. But they did divorce, but not until I was like 18.
Oh,
So I was not a little kid.
right.
But the fact is, gosh, and I know this is the sort of a show where you probably don't want to have people say controversial things. I think they probably should have divorced a lot before that. They were not a happy couple. They were conflicted, and it was an unhappy household. And my memories of fatherhood were not very fulfilled through my father. I actually relied a lot more on my pastors and my teachers for father figures than I did for my dad.
Okay. Michael, what about you?
Well, my upbringing was also not necessarily I didn't know my father really. I met him only twice growing up, once when I was 7 and once when I was 10, and never had any connection with his side of the family. I did, however, have what I affectionately referred to as a stepfather figure. My stepdad, Kevin, he and my mom have been an item since I was young, but they actually didn't get married until a couple of months after my wife and I got married. So for 19 years growing up, they were not officially together in that sense. Although I do have two younger siblings by him. So I too, much like Erin's dad, I did look to some of my Lutheran school teachers. My fifth and sixth grade teachers were both males and very positive influences in my life. Also, when I was in youth group and confirmation, my DCE, Jim Anderson at St. Michael's Lutheran Church in Bloomington, Minnesota, he was a very influential person in my faith life, and as well as my pastor there, Pastor Chris Dodge.
So then what role did the congregation play then in your upbringing, men and women, in order to help shape you into the man, the pastor, the father that you are now?
So I grew up, I was born in Minnesota, but we moved to Los Angeles when I was about 4 years old. And that's where I also went to Lutheran grade school from second through sixth grade. So I was at the church, 6 out of 7 days of the week most of the time, and felt very much at home there. Had my teachers there as not only teachers but congregation members, and some of my friends were children of my teachers, and so I had a very pleasant experience in my younger years growing up. I was the oddball elementary age kid who, if my friends who went to other churches or didn't go to church had something they wanted to do on a Sunday morning, I'd wake up extra early and go to early service on my own so I could go get together with my friends afterwards. So, I felt very comfortable at home or at church, essentially as a second home.
That's awesome. All right, Tony, what about you?
I think it's just too varied to try to surround it a whole lot, but both the female and male teachers, I think, probably gave me extra attention just from knowing that I had perhaps some needs there, that they paid more attention to me than probably I deserved. And part of it was because I probably did things to attract that attention too that weren't necessarily always wholesome. But there you go. But my pastors in particular, they just seemed to, I recall them, I recall responding to their messages as one of that's kind of what a father's supposed to sound like. And I knew that, even though I didn't hear that necessarily a lot at home, I knew that's what it was. And I think I kind of strove to imitate it, kind of be like that, be a gospel person, be a caring person, be a supportive person, and it was a really good thing for me. I really am the only, actually, from my generation back, I'm the only Lutheran in my family. I got sent to a Lutheran grade school because it was just like literally around the corner. I didn't have to cross the street to get there. And so it's just convenient. And that's where I learned the faith. And that's where I came into the church. And it's been a big factor in my life, to be sure.
I think it's so cool to think about. I mean, we talk about, the cycle of violence or the cycle of trauma within family units, and how difficult it can be for people who are growing up in not great environments, or not traditional environments, or not ideal environments. And yet here we have the church and the people in it and the pastors who play such a role in the community in helping shape these both young women and men to, despite whatever environment they're growing up in, to be people of faith. And so I think that's one of the things that we often, well, maybe not we, but I often don't put much thought into, is that really having that kind of a presence, having that kind of a quote unquote father figure is really important.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you don't, if you don't have somebody to model after, it's awfully hard to learn anything. I mean, you need somebody to show you to play a violin. You can't just, well, maybe some people could pick one up and play it. Not me. I need models to learn stuff like that. And the church was just vitally important for that, for me.
I have a follow-up question sort of on the same topic, but keeping in mind that this podcast goes out to Lutheran women who are not fathers. How can women in the church help fathers and young men who are going to be fathers? How can we encourage? How can we celebrate? What are some concrete things that we can? So much of this is out of our hands because, as you say, you got to learn how to be a father from a father, ideally. This is where you get it. But are there things that church ladies can do to sort of nurture that process and that growth?
I'm not sure that I can give any sort of a real step-by-step instruction book on it. That's not what you're looking for either, though. I think it's more just kind of the idea. I really think that by design, much like, and this is an important factor in our faith background, but that God wants men to be pastors, okay, and He does. That's His design. But even as Luther said himself, if men won't do it, well, then we're going to have to fill the pulpits with women. Well, that's true. But the same thing is true in families. God wants men to be the spiritual leaders of families. But if the men won't do it, then the women have to. And the women have to step up, and they have to do what they have to do and fill in. It's certainly not the way it's designed to be, but it's just sometimes that's the only choice. And so, yeah, maybe they're trying to play a violin without a model too, because they never were fathers or weren't trained to be fathers, but they're adults and they're people of faith, and they can still have a good Christian influence. It just won't necessarily be as designed.
Well, I should say, as far back as I can remember, being 2-3 years old and dreaming of being a father. It was something that was always, that's always what I wanted in my life. I always saw myself as getting married and having kids and being a father. And I didn't always see myself as a pastor. That kind of God led me toward that step by step, probably sooner than I realized. But I know that when Christy and I, even though I was petrified of the idea of having a daughter, I was so thrilled that I was going to be a father finally. Just again coming together as husband and wife and praying and singing over our children and reading words of faith, reading the scriptures to them. These are important things, and it is important as as a father that I lead my kids in that. It's a joy for me to go through the catechism with them and to realize that my younger children who can't read yet are memorizing these things as well, and that these the songs and the hymns and the liturgy and these things that we do both inside the house and inside the church and on the road, as we're driving here and there, that these are being sown into the hearts of my children. And I didn't have a great example of a father in the home for me personally, but I pray that my children will say quite the opposite, that they had a wonderful father and wonderful example of what a man of God should be. And certainly I'm not perfect, but I love my children and they know it. I love the Lord and they know it. And I'm raising them to love the Lord as well.
Oh man, it's such a big smile on my face, and I think everybody else's face to say that. Thank you, Michael. Tony, going back a little bit to what you said about God's design and about how the practical realities of our world sometimes subvert that. That really hits home for me. As we record this, my husband is deployed on an aircraft carrier and has been since January. And so I've had to be mother and father to my children for the last several months. And I can tell you, this is not the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, but one thing that maybe, and I know that I so appreciate your support for women in my situation who have to sort of step up into roles that we weren't necessarily designed for when situations demand it. But maybe one thing that I can take away from this is a willingness to, having acknowledged this truth, reality of life, that when he comes back, in way too many weeks still ahead, that I can be ready to just say, all right, I'm done. I don't need to be the dad anymore. You're back. And that maybe has parallels for the church as well, that even when situations demand that women step up into a father type role, that maybe we'd be ready to step out of those as soon as we can afterwards.
I think that's a very valuable observation. And I don't think at all that this is what you're thinking, but I would want anyone to hear, to realize that I'm not intending by that the mother gives up discipline because the father's home. Now he can be the bad guy. That's not fatherhood. And the mom doesn't give up discipline, but the roles just shift so tremendously when you have them both there, as opposed to when there's just one there. I remember when I started being out of the pew more and up in front of the church more, our kids, I can remember them being absolutely devastated by having seen their mom. Not only would she correct them, she would correct the kids in the pew in front of us when they went up to communion. And it's like, oh no.
That says a lot about you, Erin. I'm not going to lie.
You learn by what you see, Bree. You learn by what you see.
Yes. That's true.
I have to say, Erin corrected me a number of times in Japan. So,
so I do have another question here pertaining to the pastoral office and sort of your upbringing. It sounds like neither of you necessarily had the traditional growing up that we all think is the norm, quote unquote. Tony, it sounds like you're a first generation Lutheran. What was your defining moment, not necessarily becoming a Lutheran, but what was your defining moment in realizing that the pastoral ministry is where you wanted to spend your career?
I cannot attribute to why it sticks out for me, but I do have an image in my mind of a particular moment. I've always loved to sing, and as many pastors, I'm known for singing vociferously. I'm loud when I sing, not necessarily good, but loud. My mother was really
Strong.
good. I'm strong. That's right. But I always tried to imitate, and I remember one afternoon, I mentioned we were really close to the church in school. I had gone into the church when nobody else was there. I didn't think there was anybody else who was there. And I went on the balcony and was singing a hymn. I was actually singing Rock of Ages, and I was rocking it. But the pastor was there, and he came in and he observed me, and then he talked to me after it. I wasn't in trouble for having done it, and I think I really thought I was going to be because I got caught. But he was very supportive and encouraging, and he really thought that I should consider going into something where I could lead worship. He thought that would be a really good thing.
Oh.
It's kind of stuck with me.
I never knew that story.
There are several more stories you don't know that I'm not going to tell you today.
All right, question for Erin. What was it like growing up with the Reverend Tony Alter as your father?
Oh boy.
Well, he's a great dad, and he is one that I don't know. Even now, he's the one that I'll often go to talk through a tricky problem that I'm working on. So if it was in high school, it would be the one I would go to because I've managed to lose my entire paper at 1 a.m. And I'm like, it's got to be on there somewhere, Dad. He will help me find it. Or, now if I've got a tricky situation at work that I will often want to talk through that with. He's also one that will frequently embarrass me, but in the nicest ways. So there's never bitterness about it. But there is still embarrassment. Yeah.
As there should be in any good father-daughter relationship.
Oh yes.
No, he's a great dad. And like what Michael was saying about what he wants his kids to be able to say about him, I was like, that's what I can say about my dad. He loves the Lord. He loves me, and I know it, and I'm absolutely sure of it.
Well, you are correct, Erin. Thank you very much for observing that. I really do love you. I perhaps haven't always liked you, but I've always loved you.
Fair.
I think one thing that whenever Father's Day comes up, we all reflect about the dads and father figures. One thing is as a girl/woman, that a dad is that role model of what a godly man should be in your life. As you grow up and maybe get married one day, your dad is that first role model of what a godly man should be to you as a man of faith, and so that a dad plays such an important role in that. And my dad was, growing up, and I maybe didn't always appreciate it, as kids do. I wanted to buck the system, I was a little rebellious. I'm sure he has stories. But Michael, how do you see, as a girl dad, #girl-dad, how do you see yourself as a role model for your girls as they grow up into young women, especially with those fears that you talked about dealing with teenage boys? How do you see yourself as a role model for your girls?
I know, different families have different levels of closeness and physical intimacy and whatnot. I grew up in a very, very huggy family, and love to be close to my kids, love to be close to my friends, my family, and with my daughters, hugging and cuddling and story time and all of that is really, really important. Cherished time together, especially as they're still young, able to curl up on my lap and whatnot, and just making sure that I am able to put the time aside that's needed to just spend that quality time with them. My daughter Eliana, she's my 7-year-old. She's been asking me a lot if we could just sit down and color together, and it's been a particularly busy time, especially with the whole COVID thing and trying to reopen, have our services gathering again in person, and felt guilty because there were 2 or 3 days where I had to say, I can't right now because I have to go in and I have to work right now, but we will do it, and I will come back and we will sit down and we'll color together. And we got a little time just the other day, and it was, it wasn't, to me, it wasn't necessarily the most important thing in the world that I sit down and color in a coloring book, but it was important that I sit down with my daughter and spend time with her doing something that she loves and makes her feel loved by me.
And it is, as much as it doesn't feel important to you necessarily, that, like, down the line, your kid's going to look back on that and be like, that is the most important thing you can do, I feel like, as a father, is to make good on promises, no matter how innocuous it might be. But just promising your presence somewhere is so, I think, is so key for girls growing up.
Well, there's that. I agree. I agree very much. The other thing that strikes me and that I observed, and I'm feel really confident that this is true also in Michael's house, is seeing my parents interact and be in love with each other is also a really pretty great role model. My parents have always they've always been visibly in love with each other. They're always kissing each other, go to bye. They're like, my mom's going out for a walk, I'll kiss you goodbye. Like, she's not going to see him for 20 minutes. Let me just kiss you goodbye before I go.
I think she's not always sure I'm going to be here when she comes back. I think that's what it is.
Seeing that is, I think, also a really great role model of that's what husbands should look like, and that's how that relationship, and to be able to see that and understand that is a really good thing too.
I love the idea of my girls, and my boys for that matter as well, seeing me and their mother kissing more than they see, whoever on TV, knowing that we are the model of what a good relationship looks like is important.
Yes,
very much.
So one thing I really loved and that really stuck out to me in your story of keeping your promise and coloring with your daughter is that is what a good father-child relationship is based on, is the little moments. And as we are undergoing, a time without the father in our life, it brings into stark relief the things that you miss. And it's not the big stuff. It's not the big adventures, the big outings and all the fancy stuff. It's the little stuff. It's the coloring with, it's the sitting down to dinner with, playing a board game with. It's the dad jokes that we miss. Like,
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I can tell a dad joke, but it doesn't come out right.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
He's got this set of jokes that they just know to expect, and they laugh politely or whatever every time. And those are the little memories that really, they stay with you, and you miss them when you can't get at them. So thank you for the little memories, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would like to, at least it seems to me to be maybe somehow at least tangentially related, but the stuff that when it's not modeled correctly at home, I think the kids can still really learn a lot from that and can become well equipped and well prepared for life later, not because they saw it done right, but because they were able to see that that's not right. Mm-hmm. And to give you tools to use later. Growing up in a household that had alcoholism, I think has made me very sensitive to dealing with people that wrestle with alcoholism, that I wouldn't have had that without it. And it becomes a plus if the Lord allows you the Spirit to see that.
I was going to say something else, but I want to reply to or comment on what Tony just said, because, again, I think that very much is true. I've always wanted to be a father, but I didn't always have good fatherly examples. And yet, exactly what Tony was saying, just this being able to take the negative example or the lack thereof and turn it around into this is what was missing, or this was what was wrong, and I want to rectify that in my own household. So yeah, I definitely resonate with that. The other thing I was going to say was, just as a father, both to my daughters and my boys, I think I'm very, very intentional about them being respectful to their mother. Respect toward me is very important to me, but also respect toward their mother is very important, and not letting them, get away with disrespecting or disobeying her, calling them out on it, and doing it in a firm way, but also a loving way as well.
I don't know that this would be a memorable moment for Erin, but I'm really not as short-sighted as this will make me sound, but it was a real event. But I remember once in particular that Erin came home in high school with a report card where she had literally all A's but one A minus. Guess what I talked about?
Erin.
Guess what I talked about? I talked about that A minus. Well, why was that? And it's just so sad. And I had to apologize for it later once I realized what I had done. And it maybe didn't make that big of a difference to her, but my intentions were good. And I was really intending to motivate her to excel. But in doing so, it's like I just missed this great opportunity to celebrate. There you go.
I will assure you, it caused me no lasting damage, Dad.
Yeah, I think she turned out okay.
I
she still gets A minuses. I'm telling you.
I must have forgiven you and let it go. There's no lasting bitterness there.
Oh, I'm so glad we had this discussion. Oh,
yeah,
so great.
So one thing that I know Bree was really anxious to do when we decided we were going to do this episode, she wanted to actually do a little bit of dad joke time. Ooh. So, Bree.
Epic dad joke battle! It's actually probably going to be more of a joke swap. I don't want this to be a competition.
Because you know that you would get owned by Tony. That's why.
Smoked like a turkey. Absolutely would. So I guess I have a couple. Michael, I don't really know if you're into that kind of a thing. I feel like all dads have to be, but if you want to
That's
break
right.
mold,
What self-respecting dad isn't into dad jokes?
Exactly.
So I think we could just go around, do a couple rounds, share some jokes that we've got, and then we can wrap it up. I think that puts a nice little bow on it. I would love for the presidents of our fan club to indulge me in a little dad joke off. What do you think?
I know I'm going to lose, but I'll start out.
Okay, do it.
All right. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Owls.
Owls who?
Yes, they do.
Fell right into that one.
You're up, Tony.
I don't have much of a repertoire of scripted jokes. I do mine mainly just responding to speech and stuff and kind of interacting with people. But if I was going to do one, knock knock reminded me of it, and it's not as if it's new, but it's my very favorite ever. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Impatient cow.
Impatient
cow.
Okay. I wasn't going to do one, but now I have to do one.
Do it.
Because Ken and I got so tired of that joke. In our case, it's the interrupting cow. But we got so tired of that joke that we made up the only knock knock joke I've ever made up in my life. And so either one of us can pull this one out. This is a choir nerd joke for you, Sarah. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Antiphonal owl.
Antiphonal owl. Who? I love it so much.
Oh, Tony, you can write this one down.
We may be ruining the reputation of this whole program.
Get the pen out. You can write this one down. What's brown and sticky?
I'm not sure. Please share.
A stick.
A stick.
Oh man.
Well,
You got any, Michael? You got any more? I could go another round. You want to go another round? You got any more?
Oh, I'm not good at thinking of things on the fly.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Many dads, they don't do them on command. In fact, they often don't do well on command. They do them when they are least desired.
That's true.
Proper delivery of a dad joke.
When you want one, you're not going to get one. It's when you aren't particularly fishing for one that they will come out of the woodwork.
I'm going to share one that you guys can add to your repertoire. You can take the stick one, but here's another one for you. What's blue and smells like red paint?
blue and smells like red paint. Blue paint.
That's right. This is the best episode we've ever taped.
Oh man! Oh man!
Paint.
Oh man. Okay, I think we've had enough fun for one episode, maybe. Although I'm not convinced. But let's do some final parting words. Michael, do you have any final, words of advice or encouragement or things you want your daughters to know or women in your congregation to know before we wrap this episode up?
Well, earlier talking about good dad modeling, I think beyond showing love for your children, beyond showing love for your wife, also modeling what it means to be repentant, what it means to say I'm sorry. And especially, I think it's very powerful when fathers and mothers go to their children and apologize. I remember in my own life when my mother would apologize for things, and maybe they were big things, maybe they were little things, but as Christians, this is who we are. We're people of confession, we're people of forgiveness, and it's hard to model forgiveness if you don't model confession as well.
That is golden advice. Fantastic. Tony, what about you?
Best advice I would have to take with you as a wife looking for ways to support a husband being a good father is to, in spite sometimes of it being difficult, just respect the heck out of him. Treat him like he is a good father, and respect the things and his efforts to try, so that he doesn't kind of give up on it. Mighty strong men can quit sometimes if they just feel like they can't succeed. So make them think they can.
Great advice.
Also very hard advice.
Very hard advice.
Very hard advice, but that's what we got you on for, is to tell us the good stuff.
Yeah, it's true. It has been super great having guys in the ladies' lounge. We might not do this for another year, but that's okay. This is a special occasion.
This is enough.
Can I give a shout out to all of my children?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So I love all of my children: Micaiah, Tovin, Kina, Eliana, Alora, Teshua, Joa, and Jariah.
Yes.
Awesome. We love them too.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. You can find all of our great episodes like this one, except minus the boys, at kfuo.org/Lutheran Ladies Lounge or on your podcasting app. We want to know your stories about your dads, your grateful things about your dads or the father figures in your life, maybe your pastor, teachers, DCEs, any of those guys. We want to hear those stories and your shout outs to those dads in your life. Find all of that, share your stories on the Facebook group, Lutheran Ladies Lounge on Facebook.
Yeah, those of you that are allowed.
That's true. If you're a guy listening to this, you can't do that. Sorry. You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
I'm Erin's dad.
And I'm Michael.
Happy Father's Day!
Happy Father's Day.
Views and opinions expressed on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast may not represent the official position of the management or ownership of KFUO Radio, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The Lutheran Ladies Lounge is produced by KFUO Radio and available at kfuo.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Join our community on Facebook in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge.